Okay, so far, any questions, anyone, basis on our last session? Okay, so in today's session, we are going to cover unified modeling language. So this is one of the modeling language that we use as a business analyst to model our requirements. So essentially, it's a pictorial representation of what we write in plain textual format. So whatever requirements you line, either it's in business requirement document at a very high level or a described requirement in a functional specification document. So as we know, we all are at the end human beings, we don't like to read that many lines of text. So for example, if you write a BRD of 600 or 500 pages, or a functional spec for around 150 200 pages, so we don't tend to read those many lines in detail when it comes to understanding a particular requirement, whether it's a developer or quality assurance person or your business stakeholder for that matter, don't really feel like reading those requirements. So what if a possibility wherein we could model the requirement in pictorial notation, wherein they see the pictures and they understand what is expected out of this particular functionality within a given system. So to mitigate that particular challenge, we use pictorial representation in our requirements, that is called as UML modeling. Now this session is divided into two parts. So the first part we would cover today and the second part we would be covering tomorrow. So today we would essentially understand what is UML, what is object oriented context, what are UML diagrams, then some diagrams that are part of your UML infrastructure like use case diagram, class diagram, component diagram or package diagram, and then we would do a small hands-on using Lucidchart. So you can follow the link given in the portal for getting your free Lucidchart subscription trial version. You can practice your UML diagrams in that particular tool. So we'll begin our session by understanding what is unified modeling language. So like I said, many stakeholders would be having different perspective in and around a particular requirement. For example, how an end user would interact with a particular system, how operation guy would be interacting with a particular system, or how admin person would be interacting with a particular system. So they have their own flow to follow when it comes to interacting with a particular system. The system would be same, but every user would be having their own perspective or view around interacting with a particular system. So there would be certain restricted area in a particular system, because if you consider an admin user who is interacting in a particular system, he would probably having access to everyone's areas, everyone's dashboard, all other users dashboard. But if you consider a regular user like you and me, we won't be having access to all the areas in a particular system. We would be having access to a certain area of a particular system, and whatever interaction we would be doing in that particular system would be restricted basis on our usage to that particular system. For example, if you consider the portal part that you use to view the videos, so you only have access to that particular dashboard, your subscription dashboard. You won't be having access to any other users or any other subscription dashboard, because your region is restricted by the admin of that particular website. Only the areas wherein you have been given access, you would be able to access that particular area, and whatever functionalities have been enabled for you, for example, changing a particular password, or viewing a particular content, or editing a particular demographic information, or asking a particular question, raising a support issue. So these are some areas wherein you have been given access. Only you can go through those particular area and you can interact with the system. Rest all region you cannot access. You cannot view other users demographic information for privacy reason. So there are different reasons why your access has been restricted to that particular system. Now, how do we interact, or how do we map this interaction in your requirement document? So UML is the solution. UML is a way wherein we could map different types of interactions that happens in a particular system, modeled with the user category. Depending on who is the user, how they would be interacting with the system, and what are the events that would be triggered when they come to a particular dashboard, or what are the events that would trigger when they are accessing a dashboard wherein they are not having that particular access rights for that particular dashboard. So if you say UML has many stakeholders, many views. So architecture may be many things like end user. I mean, there would be different stakeholders who would be interacting with the end-to-end system architecture, which would be having your end user, project manager, system engineer, developer, tester, maintainer. Then there would be multi-dimensional view of the system as well. So if you consider the subscription level, so let's say you are running a particular rewards program in a particular system. So rewards program are essentially built in a fashion wherein we have multiple membership tiers. So for example, we have platinum, gold and silver package. So silver package is something lies at the bottom. Then comes your gold package and then comes your platinum package. So this way, depending on their tiers, we maintain a dimension in a particular system from lower dimension to upper dimension. So that is also feasible to represent using your UML. Then comes your multiple stakeholders views and their blueprints, like how they would be viewing the system when they are provided access to that particular system, and how the system interaction happens. That is essentially your blueprint. Now before getting into UML, let us understand what are models. So models are essentially used to design software application before coding. So before coding, like interaction that would happen in a particular system, we need to model them. Model them means we have to give a pictorial notation for how we would be interacting with that particular system. The coding is not yet in place, but we have modeled that system basis on our feedback with our respective stakeholder. So they are nothing but your higher level abstraction of a particular system. How the system would look like, how the functionality of a system would look like at a higher level. So in other words, they are the blueprints or the plans that would help build our software project. So development team would essentially be using this particular UML diagrams, this blueprints, and they would be coding the system basis on this blueprint. For example, if you are planning to build a particular construct a particular building, you would be always needing a what I would say blueprint in place before building that particular tower or skyscraper, whatever it is. So essentially, the blueprint would be in a CAD software format, CAD software file format, or it could be in a particular chart that you would be using, the civil engineers or the constructor engineers would be using to track the progress of that particular construction. So similarly, as a business analyst, our blueprint is the UML diagram. So we would be using the UML use cases, and we would be validating whether whatever development team has coded is meeting as per the UML standards that we have defined for that particular project or not. So we would be using UML to track it, to gather the requirement, and to validate whether what the development team has coded so far meets the business expectation or not. Now, it is the way to visualize the design and check it against the requirement before one starts to code. So it's not like that you would be sitting with the business stakeholder, you would be creating your UML diagram and giving it to the developer to build. No, that is not the process. You would be sitting with this business stakeholder, you would be first understanding their requirement, and then you have to probably conduct some JAD session with the development team in order to check the feasibility around its implementation, whether whatever requirements the business stakeholder has given, whatever UML they have agreed upon, is it feasible to construct the system in that particular way or not. If not, then you would reach out to your business stakeholder with your recommendation and suggestions. So that is one thing that you do. Until and unless your UMLs are not properly signed off and approved by the business stakeholder, you cannot go about starting to code. So your coding would always start once your UML and all the necessary related artifacts are approved by the business stakeholder. So models are also the vehicle for communication with various stakeholders. Like I said, every stakeholder would be having their different viewpoint in and around a particular functionality. With the help of this pictorial representation, we should be able to capture their thought process in and around particular requirement. So the model is not something that would only be used by the development team. Even stakeholders can use this model for understanding a particular requirement. So essentially, your business sponsors, your outsourcing company's business representative, your development team, your quality assurance team, and the BA team are the people who often encounter with the UML use case models. Now, this description is a generic description for modeling. Now we would come to UML. So modeling generic description means in business analysis, UML modeling is not the only thing. We also have database modeling, UI screen modeling, then we have process modeling. So there are various modeling techniques that we use in business analysis. So this is a generic description of all the modeling techniques as a whole. Now we would come to UML part. Like I said, it's a general purpose modeling language wherein you would be creating some artifacts wherein we should be able to visualize and document the models of the software system, how our end software would look like. Then it gives the high level abstraction of the system. Now, what is the abstraction? Abstraction is the view of the system, how your system would be working at a very high level. Detailing is not yet done, since it is not the pseudocode that we are writing and giving it to a development team. We are only modeling the system at a very high level, the interaction. So once the system is built, once the development team has finished their coding, then only we would be able to validate it whether the system meets the UML use cases that we have created. Now, like I said, it's a graphical notation and it has various perspective associated to it. We create a graphical structure when it comes to UML modeling. We depict the system in a graphical format rather than writing those 100-200 lines of plain requirement. Now, it is used for business modeling and modeling for other non-software systems too. Now, UML is not something that only IT projects use. UML can be used by any industry as in any domain, you say your retail and manufacturing domain or your oil and gas domain. Any domain can use UML. There is no such restriction that only IT projects would be using UML or use cases. Now, like I said, UML is a successor of object-oriented analysis and design. Now, before UML, there was something called as object-oriented analysis and design in software programming world. Now, what is object-oriented analysis and design? So it's now there are two kinds of system that existed in earlier times. One was structured development and one was object-oriented development. Now, structured development had certain cons associated to it, wherein it had different memory issues or different programming challenges to address. In order to mitigate those issues, they came up with object oriented analysis and design. So object oriented analysis has typically 4-5 concepts under it. We had classes and objects, we had inheritance, we had polymorphism, we had encapsulation. So these were some of the core concepts basis on which object oriented analysis and design development essentially happened. Now UML essentially takes all those property of object-oriented analysis, the classes and objects, the inheritance, the polymorphism, and the encapsulation aspect, and basis on that, it creates your pictorial representation. Now, when you talk about the perspective of a system, the system essentially has these four perspectives: the structural view of a system, the implementation view of a system, the behavioral view of a system, and the environmental view of the system. The structural view is like how the system would be having the interaction happening over there. For example, we would be having different class diagrams, different objects diagram to indicate how the interaction would happen in a particular system. And then we would be having composite structure diagram, that is package diagram. Then we would be having your behavioral diagram. Behavioral diagram as in if there are a set of processes that are happening, like we saw in our HRMS example. So there was a sequence associated with that particular steps. So those can be represented in terms of sequence diagram. Now, communication diagram is something like if your system is interacting with any third party system, how the communication would be happening. So that behavior we can model using behavioral view. Similarly, state diagram, activity diagram, interaction diagram, and timing diagram. Then comes our implementation view. Implementation view is like we are having different components in a particular system. Components as in, if I consider an insurance domain project, I would be having policy issuance module, I would be having billing module, I would be having claims module, and I would be having reporting module. So these modules are nothing but our components: policy, billing, claims, and reporting. So how you would be developing an implementation view of that particular system with the help of your UML diagram. So that is your implementation view. Then comes your environmental view, which is your deployment diagram. So like I said, we would be having multiple environment in a particular system. We would be having production environment, we would be having user acceptance testing environment, we would be having testing environment, system integration testing environment, development local environment, then any XYZ environment if we have. So to depict those environmental views, we use a deployment diagram. So essentially there are multiple diagrams in place which would help us achieve these four perspectives of a system. To summarize, structural view would be having these three category of UML diagram. Implementation view would be having these two category of UML diagram. Behavioral view would be having these six category of UML diagram, and environmental view would be having this one particular category of UML diagram. And the only solution to model these views is with the help of your UML or use case diagram. Now, before moving into UML, we would first understand what is object orientation. Now, when it comes to object orientation, we have specific terms to address. For example, a model is an abstraction of the underlying problem. So whatever we are modeling using a particular UML diagram, that is nothing but a problem statement. So we have a given problem, how to map this functionality in a particular system, or how to add this functionality for a particular system. We do a modeling using UML diagram. So modeling is like we are creating a blueprint of that particular functionality in a pictorial representation. We although have the textual requirements in place, but in order to make it more comprehensible to our business user, we model them with the help of UML diagram. Then comes the domain part. So it's an actual world from which the problem comes. So domain could be anything, your banking, your insurance. Within that particular domain, what are the subdomain, what are the tertiary domain? So whatever it is, we would be using that as well when it comes to object oriented analysis. Now model consists of objects and messages. Now objects are nothing but who are sending the information. For example, if I say that I am representing myself as an object, so object can be anyone. It can be you, it can be me, any thing. It could be a system itself, a particular object in certain cases. So how I am interacting with other users in a particular system. For example, I am user A and you people are user B. I am serving as an instructor and you are serving as my students. So how an instructor object would be interacting with the student object? Of course, with the help of messages. Now, how the messages would be sent? For example, if I give you an assignment, so how I would communicate to you with the help of a system? By sending you some messages via the system. Now, if you are having access issues for a particular content that I have uploaded in a system, how you would be interacting with me? With the help of messages. So object-oriented analysis give more emphasis on creating these objects and the messages by which they would be interacting with each other. Now objects have certain things called as attributes, and they can do certain things with the help of behaviors and operation. Now what are attributes, what are behavior, and what are operations? Behavior or operation. Now attribute would be like, for example, I am the instructor object. I am an instructor. So what would be my attribute? My attribute would be the name, my name as an instructor. My attribute would be which class I am teaching at this point of time, the business analysis class. That would be an attribute. My attribute would be what are my schedule as in every weekends I would be conducting the session, so that would be my attribute. My attribute would be I have to deliver a session within 2 hours, so the timing along with the schedule, that would also be an attribute. Now what are behaviors or operation in that case? So instructor would be having behavior like after completion of that particular session, I have to upload certain videos to that particular portal, so that is a behavior uploading part. Then I have to review everyone's assignment, so review is again a behavior or operation. Then I have to give rating to the students, or I have to score their assignment, so rating or scoring is a behavior. So object is the person, is the user who is interacting with other users in a particular system with the help of messages. Objects would be having certain attributes, and in order to interact or send messages to a particular user in that particular system, they would essentially be performing some behavior. For example, adding a particular student, uploading assignment. So these are nothing but your behaviors or operation. Now, the value of an object's attribute determines its state. Now, state is something that determines the object's attributes. For example, if I say that the session is planned, it is not yet delivered. That means the session or the schedule attribute would be in pending status. It won't be in delivered status if you consider it state. Now, once I deliver that particular session, it would be marked as delivered. So typically, when you purchase a particular purchase a particular product from an e-commerce website, your order goes through various states. For example, order placed, order packed, order shipped, order delivered, and order completed. So that are nothing but the state of the order object in that particular e-commerce system. So similarly, every system would be having certain states basis on the operations or the attributes that are part of that particular infrastructure. Now coming to the classes and objects part. So classes are the blueprints for the objects. So a class wraps attributes, data, and behavior, methods, or functions into a single distinct entity. So objects are nothing but they are the part of your class. So to summarize, let me give you an example. So let's say I have a particular class. Then I would be having certain attributes. Attributes as if the instructor would be having certain attributes. Instructor name. We'll keep it till here. And then we would be having certain operation or methods. Now the class name here is instructor, and they are having this many attributes under them, and we would define some methods. For example, review assignment, upload assignment, provide feedback. So these are the certain actions that we should be performing in a particular system. Now this is a method. So methods are always used in this particular fashion whenever you are writing a particular method. Now this implies that this is an action that they need to perform within a particular system. For example, reviewing an assignment, providing assignment feedback, and uploading an assignment. And this is the name of the instructor, details, and schedule of the instructor. Now then I would be having one more class as called as course. Now this is about class instructor, this is about class course. Now I would be having certain attributes in this as well. Class course would be having attributes like course name, course schedule, course area, and then it would be having attributes like add student, add instructor, add schedule. And then we would be having one more class called as student class. Now student would be having same thing, student name, student schedule, and other student demographics. Operation would be enroll for a class, submit assignment, map to instructor. Now these are some of the blueprints that we have created for a learning management system. So let's say we are talking in a context of learning management system. Now our learning management system would essentially be having these classes: instructor class, wherein all your instructor details would be there, and whatever operation he could perform in a particular system, those operations would be listed up. The same learning management system would be having a class called as course. Whatever courses are existing in that particular class, it would be having all the attributes pertaining to that particular course and whatever methods that could happen in that particular course. For example, if we consider a course would be having a functionality to add students who would be enrolled to the particular course. For example, our business analysis session. So that is nothing but a particular course. Now you are coming as a student and you are being added to that particular course, or to that particular course within a particular system. Now once you are added to that particular course, you need an instructor. So what essentially the learning management system would do, they would search for an instructor who teaches business analysis, and what they would do, they would add that instructor to this particular course for business analysis, like they have added me. Then comes the schedule. Now once the course you have enrolled, you have the course added in your dashboard, you have the instructor added to in your dashboard. Now in order to begin delivering that particular course, we need a schedule. Now schedule is something that has to there in a particular course. Now course already has something called a schedule. Now schedule is something that needs to be configured when we have the student and instructor added to it. Now what about these classes then? Student and instructor. So student class would essentially be responsible for enrolling the student or enrolling a particular student for that particular um, session wherein you would be having, or that particular course wherein you would be taking as a student. Now student class would be having few more capabilities inside them. For example, if they complete a particular assignment, they should be able to submit the assignment. They should be mapped to a particular instructor. So these are some of the capabilities or the features the student class would be having. Similarly, instructor would be having review assignment, upload assignment, provide feedback. These all methods or operations or the capabilities that they could be able to do with this particular class. Now, how do we use this particular blueprints? Now these are something at a very high level view of a system. Now how we should go about using them? So using them is nothing but we create an object. For example, I want to use student class, so I would be creating an object of student class. So object could be anyone. For example, object could be me myself. I would be creating the student object, that is I am myself, and then I would be writing the other attributes inside that particular object. For example, this is my name that I would be writing over here, the schedule, that is weekends, 2 hours, then the demographic, where I stay, I'm from India, and whatever detail. And this is our operation, like which course I have enrolled for. I have enrolled for business analysis course. What is the status of my assignment? 5 assignments submitted, and so on. This is how you should go about creating an object of a particular class. So object creation is like you are instantiating these instantiating these particular class along with their attributes. Attributes as in you specify what are the details that you need to give. Think it from a UI perspective, wherein you are taking inputs from a particular student. So what you are taking inputs from a particular student is like you are asking them for information in a enrollment page. You are asking them what is your name, what is the details, what are your other demographic information, and basis on that you assign this thing to their dashboard via the backend. This is something that they won't give you. This is something the system would assign to them. This is something the object would give you. For example, if you have created a particular UI screen wherein you are taking information, this is something you would give to the system, and this is something the system would do for you, the capabilities associated with your class. So this is how your classes and objects work. Any questions, anyone? I know this is a bit tricky, more from a programming perspective, but still, if you have any questions. Okay. Now, similar to classes and objects, we have other concepts: abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Now, I would first start with inheritance. So, inheritance is like you are creating a new class from an existing class. So, for example, we saw 3 classes now: student, instructor, and the courses class. Now, let's say I want to create a particular class which is inherited from these 3 classes: student, instructor, or and the course. So, let's say I want to develop an alumni network for a particular system. Now, in order to create an alumni network, I need to first have certain student, then I need to have a certain set of instructor, and I need to have the course detail from where I can get an understanding whether he was our alumni or not, whether he was the particular student has taken that particular course with us or not. So alumni would be a new class which would contain some of the attributes from course class, the student class, and the instructor class. So all these 3 classes would be inherited to create an alumni class. That is inheritance. Now, what is polymorphism then? So polymorphism is like it defines the mechanism to exist in different forms. Different forms as in, for example, I create a particular course for business analysis. Then I would be creating the same thing. Let's say I want to create what I would say a specialized program for a particular area. For example, I want to create a specialized program for business analysis. So I would essentially be using the course class, but instead I would be giving them a name as specialized program. So to the system, it's a course. Even the specialized programs are also course, and the regular vanilla course are also course. But what I am doing additional here, I'm creating a different form of that particular course, or I would be giving some different functionalities to that a particular course. So what essentially I'm doing is I'm keeping the same thing, but the format is different. The format or the structure is different. So that is essentially polymorphism. Then comes your Encapsulation. So encapsulation is like mechanism for binding the data together and hiding them from outside world. So encapsulation happens many places. For example, I have given access to your portal. Now in that particular portal there are different other students as well. Now are you able to see their details? No, because I haven't enabled that feature for you people. So what I have essentially did is I have hidden some of the details from you people, that you can only see your details, you cannot see any other member details. So that is where you use encapsulation. Or you can see some basic details of other member, not the entire detail, like where they stay, what is their contact number, what is their email id, in order to prevent spamming of information in a particular system. So essentially if you go for a particular public domain website, you see there are multiple people's commenting on that public domain website, but are you able to see their email ids or phone number or other member information except name? No, you only see their name and their display picture. You don't see their email addresses and phone number. Why? Because encapsulation is in place. You cannot see their details, because if they go on exposing those details, it would be more like spamming of a particular information. Then comes your abstraction. So behavior of a real world entity, like I explained you, classes and objects is a form of abstraction. Now I would give you certain examples. Now you have to tell me whether that example falls under abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, or polymorphism. Here is first example. Now we'll take an example of Facebook. Now my first question is, out of these four things that we saw just now, does it fall to any of these things? Abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, or polymorphism? You can see the definition as well here. So essentially, these are all example of encapsulation. Encapsulation, if you go by the definition, mechanism of binding the data together and hiding them from outside world. So it's up to you how much information you can expose for a particular object. Now user A and user B are an object of user class in particular Facebook context. Now it is up to me that I want to show all the details or selective details, or wish to not disclose any details for a particular object, user A and user B. So these things can be achieved via encapsulation. So this all were essentially examples of encapsulation, wherein we decide how much to show and how much to hide from each other object. Now we'll start with UML diagram, what it is. So this is how your UML diagrams look like. So essentially we have nine, that is 2, 4, 9 types of UML diagram. Now these 9 types of UML diagram falls into different categories. Essentially there are 3 categories: interaction diagram, behavioral diagram, and structural diagram. Now what are interaction diagram? Interaction diagram, like I said, if there are any behavior that is associated with a particular you know objects or a particular set of actors that are in part of your UML infrastructure, those can be modeled with the help of your behavioral diagram. Then comes your interaction diagram, like how you would be interacting with each other. And then comes your structural diagram, how the components or the modules of a system would be structured. So those 3 types of diagram typically gives 9 types of UML diagrams in a typical UML modeling infrastructure. For example, sequence diagram and collaboration diagram are part of your interaction diagram. State chart, activity diagram, and use case diagram are part of your behavioral diagram, wherein you model the behavior of particular entities within a particular system. Like I said, you uploading a particular course or taking a particular course. So essentially these are behavior in a particular system, how you model those behavior in a particular system. For that you have the behavior diagram. And like I said, the structural diagram are nothing but the way you structure or organize your infrastructure or system. So for example, classes and objects are part of your structural diagram, wherein you create a blueprint first with the help of class, and then you create the object of that particular class, and then comes your module level structure, the component diagram, and the deployment diagram. So in all there are 9 types of UML diagram. So we'll first start with use case diagram. So use case diagram is nothing but your outsider's view of a system. It emphasizes on what a system does rather than how. It never talks about how the system would be modeled. It always talks about what the system would do. Like how it would never ever talk. What the system would do. I need an upload functionality. I need a review functionality. I need a feedback functionality. So we are always talking about what rather than how you would code in the actual system. So that is something your use case diagram talks about. So it would essentially be a scenario based diagram, wherein we would be having different scenarios that pertains to a particular functionality. We can have n number of scenarios for a particular functionality. For example, if we are having an upload functionality in a particular system, what would be typical scenario that you would be modeling in upload functionality? For example, who all are allowed to upload a particular file in a particular system? What would be the file size of upload? What are the typical file types that can be uploaded? So these are different scenarios basis on which you would be creating your use case for an upload functionality. So a scenario can always be modeled with the help of an example, what happens when some actor interacts with the system. So scenario together accomplish a goal of the user. So in use case context, we would be having something called as actor. Actor is the user who would be initiating or triggering that particular use case scenario. For example, you as a student are uploading a particular assignment file. So uploading a particular assignment file is something called as your case. Upload is a case. Now case would be having different scenarios. For example, what is the file size, what are the file types, or you are authorized or not. Those are cases in a particular use case, or I would say those are the scenarios in a particular case. Now who is initiating that upload event? It's you as an actor. And when it comes to me, who would review those assignments? It's me. So actor in my case would be me myself, that is an instructor. So you have to first identify who are the person who would be interacting in a particular system and who would be triggering that particular action. So those triggering personalities in a particular system are called as actor, who would initiate this use case, like uploading or submitting feedback or reviewing something, those kind of things. Now every use case diagram has actors, use case, and communication. Communication is like what are the details they would be sharing when an event occur or when a use case is triggered. So if you see, these are some of the notations that we use in a use case diagram. For example, for writing a use case like uploading, review, those kind of use cases, we use this oval shape. The actors are represented in the skeleton format. Now system boundary is represented in a particular this square box. Now what are system boundary at the first place? A system boundary is like what is the context wherein this use case and the actor would be interacting. So there would always be a system boundary. For example, your system is interacting with 10 other third-party systems. So those third-party systems are out of your system boundary. You are writing use cases for your system. So whatever functionality comes under your system's, what I would say, area would be modeled in a system boundary. Then comes an association. So every actor would be linked to a particular use case. So they are associated with this particular simple plain line called as association. Then comes extend. Now extend is a relationship from an extension use cases. For example, if you are using another use case to trigger your use case, for example, that we discussed, if I want to create an alumni network, so I would be using certain use cases from course use case, certain use cases from student use case, and certain use cases from instructor use case. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm extending those three use cases to create my alumni use case. Okay, so that is extension. Then comes generalization. So it's a relationship between a more general use case and a more specific use case. For example, if I am having a particular payment method, okay, now the payment method could be Visa, could be MasterCard, could be Amex. So what I'm doing, I'm generalizing a particular payment method with taking all different kinds of payment gateway into consideration. So I'm essentially generalizing the use case over there. Then comes include use case. Now include use case is like you are including an already existing use case. Now there's a difference between extend and include. Extend is like you are extending. Extending means you are adding more functionality to a particular use case. And include is like you are using all together use cases, all other use cases to create a new use case altogether. Okay, so in our earlier case wherein I created the alumni thing, okay, so alumni thing is like I have extended the functionalities of the use case of student, instructor, and course, wherein they can go and enroll themselves as an alumni. Alumni as in that's an extension of their particular functionality. But when I say include, include is like I want to create a new functionality altogether, but include the older functionality. For example, if I consider, let's say I want to create a specialized program. Now specialized program is like I would be including some of my 3-4 courses to create a specialized program. So in this case what I'm doing, I'm including all of those courses, 3-4 courses to create a specialized program. So here I am including it. So that's the difference between extend and include. Extend is like enhancing the existing functionality, and including is like using the existing functionality and creating a new functionality. Then comes dependency. So dependency is a relationship that represents that a model element relies on another element. If there is any dependency between two use cases, then you can show them with the help of this dotted line. Then comes your collaboration. So it describes the structure of collaboration element roles, each performing a specialized function which collectively accomplish some desired functionality. And its primary purpose is to explain how a system works, and therefore it typically only incorporates those aspects of reality that are deemed relevant to the explanation, such as the identity or precise class of the actual participating instances are supported. So if there are specific cases wherein you would be having 2 3 use cases or roles which needs to be uh, collected together, so you would be using collaboration. And then comes realization is a specialized abstraction relationship between two set of model elements, one representing a specification, the supplier, and the other represents an implementation of the letter. So if there is something called as in a context of supplier and client, so supplier is like who is providing the functionality, and client is like who is the consumer of that particular functionality or the particular use case. You can do it with the help of realization. So in actual projects you won't be using collaboration and realization that much, but the other 8 elements that I showed you, use case, actor, system boundary, association, extend, generalization, include, and dependency are the 8 attributes or 8 elements under use case model that you would be using extensively. So collaboration and realization are something that has been added to the UML infrastructure very recently, so you may not use it at this point of time. Now comes the actual use case. For example, if we see this particular use case diagram, there are different use cases over there. There is make withdrawal, make deposit use case. Then there is process transaction use case. And then there is validation of use cases. And then there is log error use cases. Now, if you go through this particular use case, so essentially what we are trying to achieve over here is we are trying to do a withdrawal or do a deposit in a particular banking domain industry. So when we do a withdrawal, what essentially happens is it processes our withdrawal transaction. Okay, now when we do a processing of a withdrawal transaction, this transaction includes validate user use cases. Now why it includes validate user use case? The reason is whenever you are processing and withdrawal, the ATM machine or the cashier, they would first validate you whether you are a valid user or not. Now, once your validation of user happens, then only you should be able to make a withdrawal. The transaction process would be successful. Now, there could be a issue that happens in a particular ATM system or in any particular banking system, that the cashier or the ATM is unable to log in. It's not always that it would happen, but there are certain instances where it could happen due to network outrage or any XYZ. So that means we should be having an use case in place to handle those network outrage. For example, log error. If there is an error logging in to that particular system, the user is not validated, the transaction process is unsuccessful, and you won't be able to make a withdrawal. So that is one use case end to end. Now, if we consider another use case, that is make deposit. Now, in order to do a deposit, also you have to process a transaction. Now, when you are processing a transaction, it would validate you. Now, when it validate you, if your validation is successful, your transaction process is successful, and you should be able to deposit that amount into your account. Now, if there is a network outrage, then this log error use case would get called, and you won't be able to process the transaction successful. So this is how you define the relationship between the use cases. Make withdrawal has a relationship with process transaction. Process transaction has a relationship validate user. Validate user has a relationship with log error use case. So these are essentially the actions that you perform. Always use verb to describe your use cases like make withdrawal, make deposit, process transaction, validate user, log error. So these are nothing but action words. Always when you are writing a use case, use action words. And do, ensure that your use case description is within 2 words. It shouldn't exceed more than 2 words. Try to make it very simple and more appealing to the user. Do not write entire sentences in when you are identifying a particular use case for a particular system. It should maximum be 2 to 3 words. Like I explained, extend and include relationship. So extend relationship is like we can add extend relationship to uh, a particular use case in following situation. For example, a part of use case that is optionally a system's behavior. In our this example, this log error, it won't happen always. It's an optional thing. So that's the reason we used extend keyword. Whenever a network outage would happen, then only a log error would happen. So that's the reason why it's used as extend. Now it's a subflow is executed only under certain condition. Like I said, if a network outage happens, so that is a certain condition. It won't happen always, but if it happens, then this use case would get called. And a set of behavior segment that may be inserted in the base use case. So this is what you would be including in your base use case of log error, and that would be used by your validate user use case. Now what's then include use case? So the behavior of inclusion use case is common to 2 or more use cases. The result of the behavior that the inclusion use case specify, not the behavior itself. So important for the base use case. For example, whenever a transaction processing happen, it would always include validate user. Why validate user? Because until and unless you don't validate whether it is a genuine user, you cannot proceed with the withdrawal or deposit request. You need to first validate him whether it's a validate user or not. That's the reason why you have included it. Now this is an example use case. So here I am having 2 actors, customer and sales manager, and this is my system boundary, and the system is called as sales order system. Okay, so customer is an actor and sales manager is an actor. Now we will try to view this requirement from both the user perspective. Now we will first start with sales manager user. Now sales manager user would be able to process insufficient credit. So that is his functionality in this particular system. Now sale a process insufficient credit would be extending place order functionality. Now place order functionality is an use case that is part of the system which would extend essentially the process insufficient credit. And who would process the insufficient credit? It's the sales manager. Now when we see this particular system in a customer perspective, so what all functionalities can customer do in a particular sales order system? So he can check order status. Now in order to check the order status, he have to first log in into the system. That is the reason why check order system has an include relationship with login. Until and unless he don't logs into the system, he won't be able to check his order. Next, he could do his settle payment. Now, in order to settle payment, he doesn't necessarily needs a login functionality. He can put the order ID or the order number and he can settle the payment. Now, when he is settling the payment, he can settle the payment via check or via credit card. There are multiple modes via he can settle the payment. So that's the reason why these 2 use cases are associated with settle payment. If there are other payment mode like do an electronic fund transfer or do an digital wallet payment, then they all would also have been part of this particular system. So whenever you have an options to a particular functionality, like in our case, when he is settling payment, he has an option to pay via check, pay via credit card, or pay via electronic fund transfer. All the option would itself come as a use case, and that would serve to the main or the master use case, that is settle payment. Now if we see the third functionality, what he could do, he could place an order. Now when he is placing an order, it's very important that he logs into the system. So that's the reason why there is an include relationship between place order over here. Okay, and then there is an extension point wherein while placing order, he is not having the necessary credit limit. Now when he doesn't have necessary credit limit, he would actually reach out to the sales manager to process that insufficient credit. So that's the reason why it is having an extension to this process insufficient credit. So this is something that would happen occasionally, not every time. That's the reason it has an extend keyword. Now there would be many cases wherein while placing order, he would be having sufficient case. Once in a blue moon, once in a while, he may be having a situation wherein his credit limits are not sufficient. In that case, the system would trigger a message to sales manager via email or via a notification, and the sales manager would review it and he would process the insufficient fund credit limit to this particular customer, and he should be able to place an order. So this is how you read a particular use case and create a particular use case in a particular system. So extend is always optional. It may not happen. Include is always mandatory. Whenever a specific action happens, if there is an include relationship with another use case, that gets included automatically, like in our case, login. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? I know the object oriented part would be a bit tricky, but that is something a base for understanding the UML. Okay, so this is the stuff wherein you need to do more and more hands-on. Then only you would be able to understand why this notation are used, when this notation are used. No matter how much I explain you, it may be going a bouncer for you people. But once you take a context, a business scenario, and start identifying the system boundary, the actor, and what are the typical functionalities they would be using, it would be more comprehensible for you people. So in a particular interview, they may ask you about what are actors in use case, what are system boundary, what is include, what is extend in a particular use case, and what are extension point in a particular use case. Like I explained you what are system boundary, what is actors, what are actors, what do they do, what is include, what is extend relationship in a particular use case. Now what are extension point? So extension point is nothing but anything that triggers a particular use case. For example, here our extension point is if the fund is insufficient. So that is our extension point. Only when the fund is insufficient or the credit limit is insufficient, then only this use case would get extended or would get called. In every cases, it won't be extended. So that particular criteria or that particular decision is mapped using extension point, a event that would extend another use case. So that is nothing but an event. Now when use case diagrams are helpful, determining features for a particular requirement, communicating with the customers, and generating test cases. So these are the three ideal situations wherein the use case diagrams would be helpful. Now we come to the class diagram. Now this class diagram is a structural overview of the classes and the relationship amongst them. You would be having the static diagram, class diagram, and the static relationship like association, subtypes, and it would be having a static structure like attributes and operations. So what are attributes, what are operations? I have already explained you. Anything that describes a particular class template are nothing but your attributes. For example, if you consider a student class, name, date of birth, um, address, those would come as attributes. Operation would be adding a student, deleting a student, updating a student. Any operation that you perform on a student class are nothing but your operations. So they are created along with use case diagram. So this is not something that is standalone. Whenever you are creating a use case diagram, you create your class diagram as well. Now this is where you transition from what to how. Now in use case diagram, we explain what is needed, but in class diagram, we would show how that can be done. So for example, if we consider this order class, we are having these things, the date and shipped. These are attributes, and these are the operations that you could perform. For example, cancellation of an order, calculation of the total value of an order, calculation of tax, calculation of total order value after the tax has been calculated, which includes your subtotal and tax, that is your total, the weight of the order, the shipping date of the order, the average order weight, and average order total. So these are something your attributes, methods, and these are something your attributes for an order class. This is how you show it. Now, how it would have direct relationship with the development team? So when they would be creating a database table, they would creating an order table. In that order table, it would be having date, shipping date. If the order has been cancelled, there would be a boolean value which would indicate the order has been cancelled or it has been not cancelled. It would be having a total column, it would be having a tax column, it would be having a weight column, shipping date column, and so on. So basis on this class diagram, they would be creating their database table, the development team. Now, when you are doing a class diagram, these are essentially the access level that you need to enforce. For example, public. Anything is available to everyone. In our typical Facebook example, which I gave you, where one user A, is able to see all the details of user B. That is your public class, wherein nothing is protected, everything is public. Then comes the other one, protected one, wherein user A is able to see selective details of user B. Not everything, but selective details. That means the access level is protected. When user A is unable to see any of the details of user B, that means the access level is private. So that is completely restricted. This is completely unrestricted, this is selectively restricted, and this is completely restricted. So these are the three attributes, three symbols that you can apply on both attributes as well as operation. If you see this thing, minus minus, minus minus is nothing but your private. No one can see it. Plus plus is something that is your public. Everyone can see it, whoever is placing this particular order. So this is how you create a particular class with the attributes, method, and their access level, plus, minus, or hash, public, protected, or private. Now these are some of the operations that you perform. What are operations that we perform in a particular class? So operation is the implementation of the service that can be requested from any object of a class in order to affect a behavior. It is used to manipulate the attributes or to perform more action. And operations are normally called as functions, or the signature, which should have a signature return type, or it would be having any parameters. Now what it says, that whenever we are creating a particular operation, so operation would be having a particular attributes or the parameters associated with it. For example, if we want to calculate a shipping date, so where we would get this shipping date parameter? From this date, which is actually a private thing, the attribute part. And all the operation or all the functionalities would be having an access level associated with it, whether it's a public functionality, whether it's a private functionality, or whether it's a protected functionality. So that is what it talks about here. The signature, what are the return type? A name or zero or specific number of parameters. So if you see here, there is a specific return type. Now what is return type? Return type is the format wherein the function would return you a value. For example, if you cancel a particular order, the value would be in a void format. It would give you a it essentially won't return you anything, but when you log in into a particular system, you would see a flag that this order has been cancelled. If you consider the total after the function has been executed, calculation of total amount, the return type would be money. The end result or the outcome of execution of this method would be visible in the format of money. Same thing for tax total, the outcome would be in the form of money. When it comes to weight, weight would be having some decimal values associated with it. For example, 1.5 kg or 1.25 kg and so on. That's the reason why the return type is given as decimal. So whatever function you write, you have to specify its return type, whether it's return any value or not. If it returns any value, what is the type of the value, whether it's money, whether it's decimal, whether it's a particular character, whatever it is. So this is an example of class diagram. We have a customer, we have an order class, we have a payment class, we have a credit, cash, check, order detail, and item class. Now let us examine this class thing over here. So when we have a customer, so customer is having attributes, name and address. Now customer is placing an order. So what is essentially happening in system? An order class is getting executed. Now in that order class, we have attributes like order date and the status of the order, order placed, order cancelled, order processing, and so on. And then we have certain methods that get called when an order happens. For example, calculation of tax, calculation of total order value, and calculation of total order weight. Now in order to calculate these detail, we need to have an order detail and the item detail. Now what is order detail? Order can have multiple items in it, a single order. A customer can place multiple items within a single order and he can place an order. So for this particular order, we would be having an order detail class wherein we would be giving the details of the order. For example, quantity, tax status, what its subtotal, and calculated weight of that order. Now, a particular order can have multiple items under it. So we would be having this item class wherein we would be specifying individual item within a particular order. For example, a customer Sunil is placing an order for having, let's say, 4-5 orders under it, and that 4-5 orders or 4-5 items are described using item class, and the collaborative screen that you see during the checkout page is nothing but your order detail page, wherein I would be including one pen, one notebook, or two sticky pads, and so on. So notebook, pen, and sticky pads are nothing but your items. An order detail would be having one pen, one notebook, and one sticky item. And your collaborative order would be having their associated tax, total, and total weight, summarizing all the order detail within that particular order. Now, in order to process that particular order, we would be needing a payment method. Now, payment would be another class which would be having the amount. Now, how you would do a payment? Either via credit, either via cash, or either via check. So this is something you have to specify, whether what is your payment method when you are selecting a payment for this particular order. So payment method is your class, and you are generalizing the payment method using the payment option: credit, cash, or check. Now credit, cash, and check have their own attributes and functions that needs to be executed. For example, if you select a credit option, there is a function called as authorization. Now why do we need an authorization? Because we are establishing a connection to a third party system, the card issuer system, the Visa, Master, or Amex card. So that's the reason why we have the authorization method over here. Only after the authorization has happened, then only your payment would be marked as successful and your order would be placed. If the authorization doesn't happen, the payment would be unsuccessful and you cannot place a particular order. Now there is something called as association between here. Now association are represented in simple lines. For example, customer and order and payment. Okay. Now when you see this 1 and 0 dot dot star, what does it mean? It means one customer can place multiple order, and for one particular order that could be multiple payment that could happen. So for example, if a system is like that wherein you are accepting part payments, so first part of payment you made it via cash, the other part of payment you do via credit card using an EMI functionality or so on. In that context, it would be multiple payment for a particular order. Now then there is something called as multiplicity. If you see over here, there are different multiplicity. So one order detail can have multiple order items under it. So this way you can show it with the help of a class diagram. Now like I said, these are the class name, these are the attributes, and these are the operation or functionalities that you have in a particular system. Now associations in class diagram are nothing but the structural relationships where instance object of one class are connected to instance object of another class. For example, an employee works for a company. So employee class has a relationship with the company class. Now a company has number of offices. So the company has a relationship between different offices. So one company can have different offices. So here the relationship is direct. Employee has relationship directly with the company, one to one. Company has a relationship with different offices, one to many. So this way you can show the association, one to one or one to many. So this is an example. A person or employee works for a company. So this is an one-to-one relationship. Now this is an example of a reflexive association within a class, wherein a class has an association to itself. Now for example, you all might be aware of directory and file concept in a particular system. So we have a directory, we have different files, and then we have subdirectory. So directory has an relationship to itself, that is your subdirectory. So directory can be your C drive, can be your D drive. Now within that C drive, D drive, it has different subdirectory. For example, you can have different folders. Within that particular folder you can have different files. So directory and subdirectory have a reflexive relationship amongst itself. So in regular cases you may not find a reflexive association in major cases, but yes, these are some of the association that you would find in most of the cases, one to one or one to many, wherein an employee works for a company or employee has a company has a number of offices. Now this is how we do a navigability for a particular class diagram. So here if you see, navigability is an arrow that shows an association where the direction of the association can be traversed and queried. So here we see the order class, a customer class, a corporate customer, a personal customer, an order line class, then there is employee and product class. Now if we see the navigability of this particular thing, an order can be related to a customer. So one customer can have multiple orders. So multiple order can belong to a particular customer. So this direction is nothing but your navigability. So similarly, an order line, multiple order lines can be associated with a particular product. So this is a navigability. Now what is multiple order line can be associated with a particular product? For example, Amazon is selling a particular smartphone. Let's say they are selling Note 9 smartphone. Now Note 9 is a product. Now Note 9 order can be placed by multiple people. So those multiple people are nothing but your order lines who is having a relationship with the product class, wherein multiple order lines are associated with one single product in that particular system. So this way you can use navigability to show the direction, many to one, or wherever you want to show navigation. Now these are some of the example of association within the class. So default association is always one to one. You can have one to one or one to many, zero to many, one or more, or many to many relationship as well. So here you could see car transport passenger. Then you see car transport uh, 5 passenger, car transport n number of passenger, car transport 1 to star, that is 1 to many passengers. Then car transport, two car transport 5 passenger, that is many to many relationship. So this way you can show the association relationship between them. 1 to 1, one car travel transport one person, one car transports 5%, one car transport many person, or one car transport infinite person, one car transport many person, and then two car transport 5%. So this way, depending on your object number and depending on the other object of the other class, you can specify an association, whether it's 1 to 1, 1 to many, 0 to many, 1 to more, or many to many. Now, when it comes to generalization, we have two things over here, superclass and subclass. Now, superclass is the generalization of another class, essentially called as the child, and subclass is the specialization of another class called as parent. So, if you see vehicle, now if we consider vehicle, we have different other things to be considered. For example, the wind power vehicle, or motor powered vehicle, or is it a land vehicle, or is it a water vehicle? Now, when it comes to motor powered vehicle, we essentially have trucks. When we have land vehicle, we essentially have trucks. When it comes to water vehicle and wind power vehicle, we have a sailboat vehicle, and then we have a vehicle at the top. Now, what are subclasses in that and what are superclasses in that? Can anyone identify? It's very simple. Child is superclass and parent is your subclass.
Superclass vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
its child class is different kind of vehicle like water vehicle, land vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and land vehicle, water vehicle is kind of a superclass for the water vehicle, and wind power vehicle is kind of a superclass for speedboat, which is the subclass of that.
Absolutely. So vehicle is our main parent class. Now vehicle can be of different type: wind power vehicle, motor power vehicle, land vehicle, and water vehicle. So in this case, this is our this thing subclass. Subclass wherein these two are the child classes, truck and sailboat of this particular subclass, and then this is our main class vehicle. Now, what are the characteristics of generalization? So these are some of the characteristics of generalization, like identifying the common feature. So for example, here we identify the common feature, power, venue, and so on. So we have to first identify the common feature, and then only we can go for generalization. Then we have to aim at the behavior, like more than knowledge when combining classes. Here, when we combine the classes, we check their behavior, whether it's wind power or water power, then it should go with sailboat. Whether it's motor powered or land powered, so then it would go with truck. So this way, we have to aim the behavior as well. And generalization is a bottom up process. So we start from here and reach out to the top. It's not from here till here. It's a bottom up approach. And a superclass includes all the common properties of its subclass. So whenever we are creating a superclass, it should include all of the properties of the subclass. For example, when we derived wind power vehicle and water vehicle, we inherited all the attributes of sailboat. Same case for motor power vehicle and land vehicle, wherein we derived all the attributes of truck object or vehicle. And then combining these four things, we derive the vehicle as a single generalizing generic class. Now there are certain things, or I would say certain constraints, when we are developing a particular class diagram. So basic constructs of the association, attributes and generalization do much to specify important constraints. So constraints are something that you could see it over here when you are defining a particular class. The if-else condition. For example, if order.customer.credit rating is poor, then order is prepaid. Else you can do a postpaid order. Now for example, if a customer wants to place a place a particular order, he has been given two options, prepaid and postpaid. So prepaid is like you have to pay for the order first, and postpaid is like you can have a line of credit, and for at a very specific date you can repay that particular amount. Now with the help of constraint, we specify the condition over here in the class diagram. So if the credit rating, if the customer is not that good in terms of repayment, then we would enforce the system to charge the customer upfront. There is no line of credit given to him. So those kind of condition we can put in a class diagram. So those conditions are called as constraints when you are developing a class diagram. Now then there is something called as aggregation and composition in class diagram. Now what is aggregation and what is composition? So composition is an association in which the part can belong to any one whole word, whole object, and the part cannot exist without the whole. For example, a computer system would be having a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, then only a computer system would be built. Similarly, a building would be having different rooms. Then only we would say a building has been completed. This is called as composition in a particular class context. A particular class won't exist until and unless all its associating class are present. For example, in this case, a CPU or a monitor or keyboard or mouse. Without all of this, you cannot have a computer system in place. So this is nothing but your composition. Now coming to the component and package diagram. Now to simplify the class diagram, we can group classes into different packages. The package name is on the tab or inside the rectangle, and they are shown by different dependencies with the help of dotted arrows. Now when we want to simplify the class diagram, or we want to show a high level view of a class diagram without giving too much detail, like we saw association, generalization, or those kind of constraint, we tend to use component and package diagram. So in our use case diagram, we explained what about the modeling process. In our class diagram, we explained about how this thing would look like, a detailed view of what we have explained in use case diagram. Now in component and package diagram, we would define the class diagram at a very higher level. What about the user who do not want to see these things in a bigger picture, in a smaller picture? They are just concerned about seeing it from a bigger end user perspective. For them, we have this particular diagram. Essentially, we use this diagram for our business stakeholders, wherein they are not concerned about seeing what happens actually, or how we are modeling the system by constraint, dependencies, associations, and so on. For them, we would be using package diagram. So here we would be having an accounting package, we would be having a banking package, we would be having an ordering package, shipping package, UI package, customer database package, and stock database package, wherein we would be having a dependency that bank is having a dependency with account, order has a dependency with account, UI has a dependency with order, order has a dependency with customer database, and it's a bidirectional. Customer database is also having a dependency with order, and order in turn has a dependency between shipping. Now here we are not revealing the details inside, like what all things would be part of accounting package. Now those dependencies or those description can be described in your class diagram or use case diagram, but here in package diagram we would only show it at a high level, like what are the relationship and what are the packages to the business sponsors. Okay, now I'll do some hands-on on this particular diagram. So whenever you want to create a particular class diagram, you can use a online software like Lucidchart. It's having a free account for a certain period of time. You can always use it. So when you click on more templates, if you have already signed up, you can draw it along with me, or else you can do it as per your time convenience. We'll first select UML. Now in that particular UML, there are different diagrams that are available to us. For example, activity diagram, basic sequence diagram, basic use case, class diagram, and so on. So we'll create a simple use case. So we'll go with blank UML. Now, before starting with the UML, we would first need a particular boundary. So this is a rectangle container wherein we would be defining a system boundary. So for example, let's say we name this system as something policy administration system in insurance context. Okay, now this is our system boundary, policy administration system. Now we need certain actors who would act in this particular system, or who would essentially be interacting with this particular system. Now who all could be the actor over here? So an actor would be your end user, whom I would named as insured. An actor could be your agent, who would be issuing policy on behalf of insured. Before that, I want to create some of the actions for them. Now what are the typical actions that you can think of? The action would be get quote or quotation from a particular system. What are the other action that you could think that could happen in a particular insurance system? Make payment. What are the other actions that you could think from a insurance system? Issue policy. Let us go with these three actions. There could be n number of use cases that are coming out, that could come out from a policy administration system. Now let us take only these three things and try to brainstorm the requirements around it. Now, when I say get quote, when I want to get a quotation from an insurance company around what would be my premium. So what do you think? Will there be any sub use cases that would get called? Yes, it would be calculate premium. This would be a sub use case. Now, how do we relate get quotation with a calculate premium? Can anyone tell me whether it would be an extend relationship or include relationship? this relationship. When a quotation is being given to an insured, does it happen every time or does it happen occasionally? It would be an include relation. Why? Because when I am giving a quotation to the customer, every time it would call the calculate premium use case. So it would always be an include relationship. Now, during the quotation process, I want to pull out some of the credit report use case. So what I would do, I would create a pull credit report. Now, this is something, a relationship that would happen here. Can anyone tell me whether this would be an extend relationship or include relationship, pulling a particular report pertaining to that insured? Include is like it would always execute. Exclude is like it would execute occasionally, depending on the situation. So what it would be? Include or exclude. Now this report could be a motor violation report, could be an integration for homeowners policy, wherein you tend to find out the current market value of the home. It would again be an include relationship every time it is pulled. Now let me create one more use case for getting a quotation. Mm, e-delivery of policy. Okay, the policy e-delivery is like whenever you have purchased a particular policy, you have to, whenever you are getting a particular quotation, you have to indicate whether you want the physical copy of your insurance policy or it would be an e-copy. So that's an optional thing. So will it be part of include relationship or will it be part of extend relationship when you are selecting a policy e-delivery? It would always be an extension. Why? It's not mandatory. It would happen occasionally, as and when need arises. So it would be an extend relationship. So this is one set of action that the insured would be able to do when he is getting a quotation. Then comes an action, make payment. Now what is make payment? Make payment is like how he would be doing a payment to the particular policy once he is um, convinced with the particular quotation. Now, when he is making a payment, like we saw in our regular example, there are different ways you can do a payment, like make a payment using credit payment. Then they could do an electronic fund transfer payment. Then they could do a check payment. These are the payment ways they can do. So we would include them as well with this particular use case. Now, what should be the relationship? Now, there would be some default payment that are already available. So those default payment would be always considered as include part. For example, if you are making a payment via check, so check is always a default payment method that insurance company has decided. So that would come as include. Rest two are optional. If they are selected, only then they would be executed. So EFT payment is your extend payment. This is not the default payment method. So they would come as extend. Same case for credit. This is not the default payment method. It would come as extend. So depending on the insurance company business, the payment method would change. So this is our second set of use case. Then comes your issue policy. So issue policy would be having a relationship with this particular actor. Now when you are issuing a particular policy, you are essentially delivering the policy documents. Now when you are delivering a particular set of documents, what are the or I would say select delivery partner. Now who is the delivery partner? Who would be delivering your policy document to the insured company? So when you are issuing a particular policy, if it's an e-delivery policy, it would get issued instantly. If it is not an e-delivery policy, it's a physical delivery, you have to select the delivery partner. Now this delivery partner would be having a relationship as include. It's always there. Now anyone can be this e-delivery partner, whether it's an United States Postal Service, or it could be any private vendor like FedEx or Blue Dart. It could be anything, the delivery partner, and you would be having a relationship like that in a particular policy issuance system. Now when it comes to agent, what an agent can do, agent can of course get an quotation. So what we will do here is like we would increase the size of this particular thing, and we would create a relationship of agent with get quotation, and all the option would remain similar. Now agent can also make a policy, so sorry, make a payment. So this option is also available for the agent. Then agent can also issue an policy, so this option is also available for agent. So this way you can create your use cases depending on your actors and what are the behavior essentially they would be having typically in a particular system. Basis on that you can go about creating the use cases, and if you feel the use cases is a bit jumbled up, you can always drag this line in this particular format and do the reassignment part. Okay, and after that when you click on file, save as or download as, you can download it in PDF format or any image format. After you have downloaded that particular file, you can use that particular file in your requirement specification document, sorry, software requirement specification, BRD, or any XYZ document. You can copy paste this particular item in that particular document and use it. So as an assignment for today, basis on our project work, you have to identify the actors, you have to identify their functionality and come up with some of the use case diagram that you feel like. So that's your assignment for today.